Leonard Lake was born in San Francisco, California in 1945. His parents divorced at an early age, causing him to live with his maternal grandparents. Lake's grandmother encouraged the taking of nude photos of his sister, which fueled his obsession with pornography. Lake enjoyed catching and dissolving mice in chemicals. This same process was used to dispose of the bodies. Lake served in the Marines for a few years before being discharged due to being diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. Lake then starred in amateur porn movies with his wife. The war in Vietnam had Lake scared into a nuclear war, and he became paranoid, causing him to make a bunker in his house. Charles Ng was born in Hong Kong in 1960. His father was strict and physically abused him. Charles, at a young age, had an obsession with stealing, martial arts, and fire setting. Charles was arrested with shoplifting at age 15. His father pushed him into going to a private school in Europe, where he was expelled in a year for stealing from the students. He then moved to the United States and enrolled in the Marines with help of forged documents from a recruit sergeant. After less than a year, NG stole $10,000 worth of automatic weapons and served jail time for 3 years. Once NG got out of prison, he immediately contacted Lake, who was renting a cabin in Calaveras County. NG joined Lake in the cabin. At this time, it has been believed that Lake had already killed his brother Donald Lake and his best man Charles Gunner, stealing money and his identity. Lake had built a dungeon, as he describes it, off the side of his house.
What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life. A slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well. And I believe that if I can construct a holding cell, a place where I can put such a woman, a facility that is so stark and so empty, so cold, so quiet, so totally removed from the world, that I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully.
Operation Miranda was a confusing fantasy that Lake created. It centered on the end of the world and his need to dominate women who would eventually become his sexual slaves. NG became a partner to his fantasy, and the two began trying to turn it into some kind of demented and sick reality.
If it ever arises again, if there's any circumstance whatsoever that leads me to think that you're even attempting to make noise, it's immaterial as to whether I hear you or anyone else hears you. You will be whipped very severely. And tell me you understand.
I understand.
I'm having a little war within myself between what I want to do and what we might call the decent thing to do. And for the moment, the decent thing to do is winning. So, rest.
Lake and Charles then went on a rampage of rape, torture, and murder. Victims included their neighbor Lonnie Bond, his girlfriend Brenda O'Connor, and their infant son Alani J. The Dubs family, including Harvey Dubs, Deborah Dubs, and Sean Dubs, Kathleen Allen, Michael Carroll, Robin Stapley, Randy Johnson, were all murdered as well. Unspecified dates in 1983, Charles Gunner and Donald Lake were murdered. The 45 pounds of charred and shattered bone fragments suggested that several more victims were murdered there. The total victim count be as high as 25. According to the courts, Lake and NG would kill the men and kids immediately, but keep the woman alive. Women would be stripped of their clothing and raped, and tortured in a custom-built room at Lake's ranch, down in his dungeon. They would videotape each other doing so as well. In the spare time, they were forced to do household work for them. The woman eventually died by either murder or died from their injuries. On June 1985, NG was caught shoplifting a vice. NG fled the scene, with Lake driving in later to attempt to pay for the vice. Police noticed that Lake's provided driver's license of Robin Stapley didn't quite match himself. Lake was then arrested when a .22 revolver was found in the car with an illegal silencer equipped on it. When left alone with a glass of water, Lake took a cyanide pill and fell into a coma, dying 4 days later. The pills were sewn into a secret compartment of his fabric. NG fled up to Canada. NG was a fugitive for a month, but was once again caught shoplifting. At the police station, NG struggled with 2 police officers, shooting one in the hand. NG was sentenced to 4.5 years in a Canadian prison. American investigators were attempting to get NG extradited to the United States. In the meantime, NG was reading up on American law to defend himself. NG was finally extradited to California, where he eventually was put on trial and found guilty of the murder of 6 men, 3 women, and 2 babies. NG's legal battle with California cost $20 million for the state. His defense team presented NG as being an unwilling participant and was forced to take part in Lake's sadistic murder spree. Because of the videos presented by the prosecutors showing NG forcing 2 women to engage in sex after threatening them with knives, the defense admitted that NG merely participated in the sexual offenses. NG is currently on death row in San Quentin. Isn't extradited? And deals some damage. Start typing. What did I not read? Oh. In later. Oh, baby, a triple.